In an earlier lesson, we worked with the list box. We modified how the elements in the list box look, and we even modified how they were laid out. But a list box is only one of the controls that you've got access to inside Blend. Now we're going to take a look at some of the other controls and take a look at how we can modify those as well. I'm going to create an empty project, and I'm just going to call this Playing with Templates. We're not actually going to create anything that we'd really want to be running or shipping. I just want to show you how the different styles can work together and show a little bit more in depth how the different controls can be edited. Now the most basic, of course, is the button. So let's go ahead and drop a button down on my window. Now as soon as we edit the template for a button, I always have the option to edit a copy of the template or create an empty template. In most cases, you're going to want to edit a copy so you maintain all of the existing behavior of the button. That means things like when you click on the button, the highlight will change and other effects like that. As you start getting more comfortable with the buttons, you may want to actually start with an empty button and create all of the states yourself. I'm going to edit a copy, and let's take a look at what a button generally has in it. The first thing that comes up is this Create Style resource. Now we've seen this before. I'm just going to create a simple resource, and I'm going to create these directly in my document. When we talked about resources earlier, you remember that I can define this in my application or in a resource dictionary so that access to this template is extended throughout my entire application or in an external file that I can move around. For now, I'm going to keep everything in this document, but always remember that you've got this functionality available should you want to make the modifications. The option up here, Apply to All, actually allows you to modify the base template for your buttons. Let's see how that works. I'm going to select Apply to All, I'm going to say OK, and now my application has gone away and all I see is my button. Now let's look inside the button. These two brackets simply indicate that this is a placeholder in the tree for a piece of the geometry. In this case, this is the template for a button. Now a button doesn't have any other placeholders, but when we get to some of the other controls, you'll see these brackets again. When you see that in the tree, you can right-click on it, but remember that this is just a placeholder, so I can cut, copy, paste, things like that at that point in the tree. But this isn't an actual control, so you'll notice that the Edit Control commands are not visible in this context menu. Now inside the template, everything from here down makes up what a button is. For now, I have a Chrome and I have a Content Presenter. Now the Chrome is a very specialized control that's part of WPF. This is based on your OS settings. I don't want to use the Chrome, so I'm just going to delete that flat out. So now all I have is an empty template. Conveniently, it's the activated element, so a template needs to have exactly one child. Remember with the layout containers, certain layout containers can only have exactly one child. A template is the same way. I'm going to go ahead and add a grid here. Now I might use a canvas, I might use a stack panel. Any of the layout containers are usable here. Just remember that since buttons are frequently created in different sizes, I want to use a grid so that everything inside my button moves appropriately. I need to make the grid the activated element because while the template is activated, anything new that I put in would replace the grid and I actually wouldn't be getting anywhere. With the grid activated, now I can start specifying what I want my button to look like. If you remember at the beginning, our Chrome had a Content Presenter inside it. Now the Content Presenter is a very special control. I'll show you a little bit more about what that does after we're done here, but I want to make sure I add one into my grid so that I have it available. The Content Presenter is in the Asset Library, and it shows up right here. With it selected, I'm going to double-click and make sure that my grid has got a Content Presenter in it. I'm going to go over to the Properties Inspector, and I want to make sure that the width and height of my Content Presenter are set to auto, and I want my margins expanded to be as large as possible. My width and height are in fact set to auto, but my right margin is set to 25. I'm going to select that and set that down to 0, so my Content Presenter will always take the entire size of my grid. Okay, the next thing I want to work with is how the background looks. The grid is still selected, and I'm going to drop a rectangle in. Now my rectangle, once again, is not taking up the entire size, so I'm going to go back over to the Property Inspector, take a look, and sure enough, my right margin is set to 25. Let me set that to 0, so now my rectangle takes up the entire space. Most people like to have rounded edges on their buttons, so I'm going to click the adorner, drag it over, round my edges a little bit, and I want to have a little more thickness to my button, so I'm going to increase my stroke thickness to 5. Now if you noticed, the text of my content presenter has disappeared. Why is that? My rectangle, since I created it after the content presenter, is on top of it. If I leave the content presenter under my rectangle, as I add content, it'll get displayed underneath the rectangle. My user won't be able to see it. So let me fix that quickly, just by dragging the rectangle up over the content presenter and fixing the order. Now I've got my basic button. I'm going to click the Scope Up button to return to my main application.